Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, of course, coronavirus is still in the news. One of the professors in the University of Michigan has actually found some interesting things, first of his study of that kind of study in the United States of its kind, and as far as where they're finding coronavirus. Also, we're going to talk a little bit about how coronavirus is spreading amongst the upper echelons in Washington. They're not immune to these types of things. And we're also going to take a look at what Dr. Fauci is saying about the vaccines and, when they might be coming on the market for the foreseeable future. Well, first we're going to start off with Dr. Richard Melvin, the professor of the University of Michigan, has been testing the waters of Lake Superior since the 4th of July for the virus that causes COVID-19 that could be brought into the water by swimmers. Well, this fall, they found what they were looking for. They found trace amounts of the virus along 4 beaches of the waters of Lake Superior. He said that understanding where to look for the virus is a key to fighting infection in the future. Well, this is the first discovery of its kind in the United States.
Well, Dr. Melvin said that finding the virus in the lake can be an indicator of the prevalence of that virus in the population that lives nearby. Now, it's interesting to note that the virus popped up in the waters of Lake Superior in a time where swimmers are much less frequenting the water there as the season cools down in North America this time of year.
Well, it's interesting that they've been testing since July 4th, which is really kind of more of a popular time.
Right.
But they didn't actually find it until the fall, so that kind of raises some more questions about how it's being found in the fall. Well, as we reported, the President of the United States and his wife recently tested positive for coronavirus. Well, at another event at the Rose Garden, where the President was announcing the nomination of Amy Barrett to the Supreme Court, few attendees wore face masks, and there was also no apparent spacing of the seats, otherwise known as social distancing. Well, after the announcement by the president, guests mingled together, shaking hands and even embracing. Well, Dr. Amesh Adalja said that this was an instance of a super spreader event. And now we're seeing blossoming chains of transmission that probably emanated from there.
Well, he continued, this will be something that will be recognized as a super spreader event when the story of COVID-19 is written. At least 8 people who attended have tested positive for COVID-19, including Utah Republican Senator Mike Lee, who was seen hugging and interacting with others, North Carolina Republican Senator Tom Tillis, and Kellyanne Conway, one of Trump's advisors, and an unidentified reporter, along with the former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie.
Notre Dame University President Reverend John Jenkins, who also tested positive, said guests were told they didn't need to wear a mask because everyone in attendance had been tested. Well, Dr. Adalja said that testing can never be ironclad. The virus can find holes in the strategy, and that people were told that they could take their mask off when their test came back, but those tests can also have false negatives that can occur when you're doing that type of testing.
Well, public health experts are hoping that the outbreaks in Trump's inner circle will cause people to take the virus seriously. Dr. Amalja said, I don't think this is a turning point in the minds, or he said, I do think this is a turning point in the minds of some people to see the most protected man in the world to be infected by this virus, despite the precautions the White House had put in place for testing. So this should make people who doubt the virulence of this virus take a step back.
Right. Well, Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, because of the coronavirus spreading amongst leaders in Washington, he's actually going to be delaying most Senate business for 2 weeks.
Well, our field correspondent Larry McGee has some more details on just how this whole thing got started and more of a chain of events, I believe, in a short video for us. Larry, what do you have for us?
The nation's leading expert on the coronavirus has been saying from the outset that regardless of status, wealth, or class, everyone who meets a certain criteria is going to be infected by the virus. We are now in the millions of those afflicted by the plague, and at this point, it has now arrived at the doorstep and entered the home of one of the most powerful residences on the planet, the White House. Let's have a further look at the details.
As President Trump continues to fight COVID-19, several people, from U.S. senators to his inner circle, are also testing positive for the virus. Here's what we know and why the story isn't over.
Today, it is my honor to nominate one of our nation's most brilliant and gifted legal minds to the Supreme Court.
On Saturday, September 26th, more than 150 people attend this White House ceremony celebrating Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett. Many guests do not wear masks or keep their distance. In the coming days, at least 9 people, including the president, are diagnosed with COVID-19. Many can be seen here in these first few rows. The event soon moves indoors, and later that same day, Trump holds a large outdoor rally in Pennsylvania.
On November 3rd, Pennsylvania will decide whether we end the pandemic, defeat the virus, and return to record prosperity.
Meanwhile, former advisor Kellyanne Conway and former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie join other campaign officials in prepping the president for the upcoming debate. They both later test positive for the virus.
No one was wearing masks in the room when we were prepping the president during that period of time.
Trump attends both indoor and outdoor events on Sunday and Monday, which brings us up to Tuesday, debate day. The Cleveland Clinic tests guests before the big night, but allows the campaigns to test their respective candidates and staff. And while face coverings are required for the audience, the Trump family removes their masks after sitting down.
People in the hall did notice that while they were all wearing masks, including my wife and 4 of my children, that the first family did not wear masks.
Then, during the debate, we hear this.
I don't wear masks like him. Every time you see him, he's got a mask. He could be speaking 200 feet away from it. He shows up with the biggest mask I've ever seen.
So far, no one from Biden's camp has tested positive, but the city of Cleveland says at least 11 positive tests can be traced back to debate organizers and the media. We also know Trump team regulars like senior advisor Hope Hicks, campaign manager Bill Stepien, and personal assistant Nick Luna traveled with the president that night, just days before they test positive themselves. Meanwhile, back in Washington, Republican Senators Mike Lee and Tom Tillis, who also end up getting COVID-19, meet with Judge Barrett. The senators also participate in a closed-door GOP lunch, potentially spreading the virus to others in attendance. And on Wednesday, the president holds another outdoor rally in Minnesota with roughly 3,000 people. It's on this trip that Hope Hicks starts to feel sick, so she quarantines herself aboard Air Force One en route back to D.C. The next day, the White House learns Hicks has coronavirus as Trump leaves for a private fundraiser in Bedminster, New Jersey.
What's the justification for having the president still go to Bedminster on Thursday and meet with donors?
My understanding is that was a decision made by White House operations because he wasn't deemed to pose a threat.
Now, it's worth noting here that the CDC says you should quarantine if you've been in close contact with someone who has COVID-19, and Hicks traveled with the president during the week. Ultimately, more than 200 guests attend that fundraiser in New Jersey. Trump starts showing symptoms on the way home. And back on Capitol Hill, Senator Lee speaks at a judiciary meeting just one day before testing positive. And while the group is socially distanced, several senators are in attendance. Senator Ron Johnson is also spotted on the Senate floor. He didn't attend Saturday's Rose Garden event, but he still tests positive a couple days later. Then, that night, the president and first lady announce they have the coronavirus. Trump is transferred to Walter Reed less than 24 hours after his diagnosis.
I'm going to Walter Reed Hospital. I think I'm doing very well, but we're going to make sure that things work out.
We also learned 3 White House journalists and RNC chairwoman Ronna McDaniel also have COVID-19. And because 3 senators test positive, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell announces the Senate won't return for a couple of weeks, but notes Judge Barrett's confirmation hearing will still take place October 12th. It's worth mentioning many Trump officials have tested negative, but that doesn't mean they're out of the woods just yet. And while the White House hasn't released a list of all confirmed cases, it's plausible we could see more positive tests over the next few days. We'll be keeping a close eye on how this potential outbreak develops as the pandemic sends a stark reminder that no one, not even the president, is immune to this virus.
Adding to that, the World Health Organization has now released information stating that those infected by the plague is 20 times that which it originally suspected, bringing the number of those globally infected up to close to 1 billion. As the plague continues to creep into and through every continent, the organization is warning that a majority of the world still remains at risk. They are cautioning that as the virus continues to spread, the world has a very difficult road ahead. The current administration has presently chosen to move ahead with the option of vaccinations as its solution to the epidemic, but statements released from the FDA concerning trial guidelines would, if nothing else, prevent one from clearing the testing phase as early as the administration might have hoped. One of the go-to men on the epidemic, Dr. Anthony Fauci, says he could see distribution of a vaccine by late 2020 or 21. Mr. Fauci also chimed in on the idea of the present plague being like the flu, stating comparatively that influenza has nothing close to the impact of the coronavirus and so shouldn't be seen and thought of as its equivalent. Despite high-level disregard and flamboyancy regarding the virus, Dr. Fauci is advising everyone to toe the line with respect to restrictions, masks, social distancing, hand washing, and so forth. And he said that though it is tough, everyone should prepare for a very different holiday season, one unlike any one they have ever had before. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Well, that's interesting, along with Dr. Fauci and what he said that, of course, President Trump wants the vaccine to come out a lot sooner, but Dr. Fauci and a lot of others are saying, yeah, not possible. It's going to be more like 2021 before we actually see something. But as we've also mentioned in the past, many have said, we don't even know if these vaccines are going to work. They're continually finding new things about COVID-19, so is it really going to be something that's going to be effective? Right? Well, the coronavirus continues to spread, and now we've learned that the Pentagon is no exception. Military leaders, including the nation's top generals, are in quarantine, now performing their duties from home after possible exposure to the virus. This raises new concerns about national security.
Well, the list is long, and it includes almost every senior military officer that works in the Pentagon, beginning with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, and Vice Chairman General John Hyten, who's been in charge of the military's response to the coronavirus. Now, also among those quarantined are 9 four-star officers, including the heads of the Army, Navy, and Air Force.
Well, all of these men met last Friday with Admiral Charles Ray, the Vice Commandant of the Coast Guard. Now, just 3 days after Admiral Ray tested positive for COVID-19. While it is not certain where Ray became infected with the virus, he, along with others now quarantined officers, all attended a White House ceremony honoring Gold Star families just after President Trump's Supreme Court nominee announcement.
Well, of course, many believe the Rose Garden announcement was a super spreader event due to the lack of face masks being worn, as well as no regard for social distancing practices. Now, the same could be said for the Gold Star ceremony that evening as well. We know that Defense Secretary Mark Esper also attended the ceremony, but did not have any in-person meetings with Admiral Ray. And just going back to that Rose Garden event, as was mentioned in the video, they were seated very closely, yes, one right next to the other, no social distancing in place.
That's right. Well, Secretary Esper, still showing up for work, did receive a visiting defense minister at an arrival ceremony this week. Esper was wearing a face mask, which is a requirement for everyone who enters the Pentagon. The chain of command for military operations starts with the president to the Secretary of Defense and then to combatant commanders around the world. The Pentagon wants to reassure the public, even though with their Joint Chiefs of Staff working from home, quote, there is no change to the operational readiness or mission capability of the U.S. Armed Forces. So in effect, they're still ready to fight if need be.
Well, it has been discovered as more and more cases emerge worldwide that some are experiencing a scary side effect from contracting the coronavirus, which that side effect is confusion of the mind. Now, the complication of delirium now seems to be emerging in patients who have the virus. Now, specialists at the Cleveland Clinic in Ohio think the confusion is directly related to the serious breathing issues that coronavirus causes.
That makes sense. Well, Dr. Previn George from the Cleveland Clinic explained to Channel 12 News that the brain is not getting enough oxygen in some of these patients just because of some of the severe respiratory issues. And for an extended amount of time, that can cause some of the individual brain cells to die. And over time, that death of some of these brain cells can be permanent, and that can cause delirium in itself.
Well, researchers are trying to make the public aware so that whether people with the virus are in the hospital or recovering at home, if they experience serious brain confusion, it could be a warning sign that they are in need of additional medical assistance, in many cases needing oxygen.
Well, so far, delirium has been seen mainly in older individuals. However, more recently, it has been discovered in younger people who are deprived of oxygen. And in short term, it does appear to go away and can be treated with medication, but there's not enough research to understand its long-term impact on a person's brain. It is unclear how many more unknowns will arise from this pandemic. It's truly an uncertain time for the world.
And as you just mentioned there, Katan, the unknowns, this is something as long as the coronavirus has been going on, they're just now saying about this, people experiencing this confusion of the mind. So there might actually be many other side effects, but that confusion of the mind, that's a very serious one that is now seeming to become more prevalent with people who do have that breathing issues.
Yeah, and it seems with the coronavirus, unlike what we would see from, the common cold or the flu or really any particular type of disease, so to speak, the coronavirus is really kind of like a broad spectrum of viruses that can cause anything to pop up that is a weakness within a person's immune system. So, doctors are continuously discovering new turns, something new around the corner, and they're trying to figure out how to deal with it. So it was interesting, like we mentioned earlier, that they're really pushing for a vaccine, but at the same time, in that same field, researchers are saying, is a vaccine even going to work? So it's going to be billions of dollars that's going to be wasted, and they're not really getting one step closer to finding a cure to all of this.
Right, and as you mentioned, it's not the coronavirus itself that really is causing these deaths. It's the underlying health issues that the coronavirus just pushes up to the surface, and that's what is causing so many deaths from this virus. But if you would like to experience peace of mind instead of the confusion of the mind, don't forget to contact the House of Yahweh, and when you do, request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. You can visit them on any of their websites by going to yahweh.com, yisroelhawkins.com, or yahwehsbranch.com. You can visit our website by going to ypnnews.com. You can email the House of Yahweh at info@yahweh.com. And for all calls outside the United States, please dial the number on your screen. And as mentioned previously, don't forget to visit the Yisroel Says and Ask Yisroel websites to aid you in the study of understanding of the scriptures and prophecies concerning this time right now and what you can do to protect yourself and your family. You can find those websites by going to YisroelSays.com and AskYisroel.com.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next is another informative and exciting message from Yisroel Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.